We have a crisis in the world, tremendous crisis, and also crisis in our consciousness, in us. I see the urgency of change, radical revolution, mutation in the mind. I see it. It is necessary. There is complete quietness of the mind, and that which is silent has vast space. Only then that which is nameless comes into being.
This is Urgency of Change, the Krishnamurti Podcast. There is a sense of inward frustration, the sense of hopeless despair without an end. Perhaps most people are not aware of it, or, if they are, they avoid it. But it is there. So what is one to do? Hello and welcome to episode 284 of Urgency of Change. The Krishnamurti Podcast features carefully selected extracts from Krishnamurti's recorded talks. Each episode highlights his different approaches to universal and timeless themes that affect our everyday lives, the state of the world, and the future of humanity. This episode's theme is despair. Upcoming themes are Holism, Activism and Social Change, and Discovery. This is a podcast from Krishnamurti Foundation Trust, based at Brockwood Park in Hampshire, UK. Brockwood is also home to Brockwood Park School, a unique international boarding school offering a personalised holistic education inspired by Krishnamurti's teachings. Please visit brockwood.org.uk for more information. You can also find our regular Krishnamurti quotes and videos on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook at Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review or rating on your podcast app. This episode on despair has 4 sections. This first extract is from Krishnamurti's third talk in Ojai, 1973, and is titled Despair, Hope and Belief.
What is the place of hope in life? If you had no despair, would you have hope? If you have never felt the sense of utter futility, the meaninglessness of existence, never felt it, never been wounded by this question of despair, would you have hope? Or is hope a reaction of despair? And therefore, hope is part of despair. Are you following all this? When there is despair, caught in a circumstances out of which I cannot escape. I want to get out of that particular circle, environment, in that particular structure. And I do not know how to get out of it. I'm caught in it, totally. And the desire, the urge to break through, and being incapable, brings about, in different ways and different circumstances, this thing called despair. I've lost my son. The utter loneliness. the meaninglessness of life. And from that arises the sense of not having any purpose, any meaning, any creative thing in life. And from that there is despair. And I look, and that same movement creates hope. Now, is it possible to be free of despair? Is it possible never to come upon such a thing and therefore free from both despair and hope? You understand? You're following all this? Am I making myself clear? You see, thought by which we live, unfortunately, thought is never new, is never free. And thought has created this prison. Not only in the field of knowledge, but also this prison of the me and not being able to get out of that me. So, thought which has made the me the center of the universe sees the futility of itself and is incapable of going beyond it. Which is, thought wants to go beyond it, beyond the thing which it has built. Please do see this. It is thought that has made the me, the ego, which has become the prison, with all its turmoil, anxiety, fear, jealousy, and so on. And thought says, I must go beyond it. And it can invent, contrive, suppose, imagine, all that, but it knows basically the falseness of it. The more sensitive, the more alive, the more it has integrity, it sees the falseness of it. And therefore, out of that comes despair of another kind. So, thought, being incapable of escaping from what it has created, then begins to have hope in something which it has projected. So, thought is creating all this. So, to see that, not verbally, not intellectually, but to see the totality of it, then thought becomes extraordinarily quiet. It has no movement either to go beyond the me or to support the me. You understand? Then what place has belief in life? For me, none whatsoever. Why should you have a belief about anything? Which doesn't mean that you have become callous, indifferent, brutal, and all the rest of it. Why should they have belief about what? Belief about my neighbor? Belief about myself? Belief in the politicians, which is the last thing you can ever have? Belief in God? Belief in your guru that he has attained enlightenment? How do you know he has attained enlightenment? because he's got some peculiar feeling or atmosphere about him, therefore you accept it. So why do you want belief? Look what belief has done in the world, for God's sake. You believe in your nationality. And look what it has done. Wars. You believe in some kind of legendary God, and look what it has done. The religious wars, the sectarian conflicts. This group which believes in that and fights for it, wanting you to join it. You know, the game that goes on. You fill your mind with belief because it has to be active about something. Whether that activity is concerned with drugs, drink, sex, or with inquiry into new consciousness and superconsciousness, are exactly the same. If you are occupied with your kitchen or with God, it's exactly the same. Because what matters is occupation, restlessness. You cannot have a mind that is completely quiet, full. There is fullness only when there is complete emptiness. You won't understand all that. So what need there be for belief? Again, thought plays its part. If you had no belief, no opinion, no judgment, what would you do? If you had no mentally occupied, going round and round with this or that or something else, what would happen to your mind? This occupation with belief, with non-belief, is part of the movement of thought, because thought is always moving, functioning within the field of the known. And in that there is no escape. The known is the prison. And from there, to inquire into the unknown is the despair. But to know exactly the function of thought and the freedom from thought, so that there is complete harmony. In that there is neither despair, hope, nor belief.
The second extract is from the second talk in Saanen 1962 and is titled The Source of Despair.
How very superficial most of us are. And behind this superficiality of existence, of everyday routine, of marriage, children, sex, behind this, there is a sense of deep despair and anguish. I think most of us are aware, though we may have houses, position, prestige, and a little property, behind all this superficiality, there is, for most of us, a sense of deep anxiety, not caused by anything, but there it is, deeply penetrating widely into our thoughts and feelings when we are not busily occupied with superficiality of life. And that despair and that sense of anxiety is not only restricted to those who are growing old, but also with those, I think, who are young, who still have to make their way in life, who may be concerned with their future, with making a success of their life, concerned with their marriage, sex and house and housekeeping. There is this underlying sense of utter hopelessness. What is the use of it all? Especially now, when the world is torn by this sense of impending catastrophe. And I would like to talk about this because, being very superficial, we turn to various forms of escapes, or we try to find a ways and means of deepening the significance of life. And can life, which is both the outer and the inner, can this life be deepened? I don't mean by going to churches, believing in gods or no gods, doing social work, or be interested in pictures, paintings and music, which to me are still very superficial. Is it possible for a mind which is, by its very nature, by its own conditioning, by its education, by the influence of society, can such a mind really go very deeply within itself? I don't know if you have asked yourself such a question, and what has been your reply to yourself. We think going very deeply within oneself is an extraordinarily difficult problem and probably not worth it. And if we do go very deeply, being utterly dissatisfied with the superficiality of existence, we haven't got the technique, the way, the modus operandi to enter into that extraordinary world, which is not merely of words, of symbols, of ideas, of intellection, which is not merely emotional, imaginative, but something much more vast, much more imminent. And I think, even though it's such a pleasant, clear, sparkling day, I think we ought to examine what brings about this depth, this clarity in which there is no confusion, in which there is no strife, an existence which is not an escape from life. And as I said, I would like to talk about it. Because it seems to me that in this modern world, where there is a widening of knowledge, a gathering of more information, more technology, where everything is being done mechanically, when the computers can paint, write poems, translate, when they can add extraordinary mathematical problems, when knowledge has become such an extraordinarily important thing, is not knowledge itself the source of despair? Please, I'm going to expand it. But don't reject or accept. Just listen to it. Because I was thinking how the clever people in the world, with their capacity to write, to express themselves, are influencing people, making them more and more dependent on external things, more and more giving significance to information and to knowledge. And whether knowledge in itself, though it may be useful at certain levels of existence, whether knowledge itself is not the source of anxiety, the source of guilt, the source of despair. Whether the mind, which has been trained in knowledge, whether such mind can free itself and be innocent. It is only the innocent mind, however much it has been through trouble, through experience, through various influences, to be free of all that and be innocent. And it's only the innocent mind that has no despair, no anxiety, no fear. But in the modern world, we are much more enclosed in fear, in despair, in the vast sense of uncertainty. Knowledge is essential. Otherwise we couldn't function at all. From the very small things to the very big, the most complicated things like flying a jet. From the small thing of knowing where you live. We must have knowledge. Knowledge of going to the moon, mathematics, biology, on the extraordinary complicated technological knowledge. But knowledge also interferes, impedes clarity of perception. It's only when the mind is free from what it has known, it's only then that there is a creative moment. Whether you are a musician, an artist, a writer, it's only in that interval. And that interval may be very small or vast and extensive. It's only in that moment when there is no knowing, if I can use that word, when there is no impingement of the past as knowledge, of all the things that one has learned, of all the mistakes, of all the failures, of all the hopes and despairs. It's only in that moment there is a sense of the new. And then that sense of the new can be expressed. If you are a musician, in composing, if you're an artist, painting, and so on. And I think it is very important to understand this. Because for most of us, experience is the way of life. The more experienced we are, the wiser we think we are. But I question that wisdom. Because you see, experience is really a response to challenge. Whether it is a very deep challenge and a very deep response, it is that interaction between the response and the challenge which is experience. And that experience is conditioned response. Please follow this a little bit. And I'm not a school teacher. I'm just stating some things which you can either follow or need not follow. Since you have taken such trouble to come here, perhaps spending a great deal of money or little money and great deal of trouble, perhaps you should also take a journey into this extraordinarily complex problem of experience and knowledge. Because what we are talking about is not philosophy, not a system of ideas, complicated, subtle, but we are talking about the way of life, the way of living every day. The day that is full of routine and habit, the day that you have to go to the office, the day that you spend with your wife, with your children in a relationship of conflict and pleasure. And what we are discussing, what we are talking about, is related to everyday existence, not to some theory, not to any verbal structure of philosophy or of ideas. So we are dealing directly, deeply with life itself, with everyday existence, with our acts, with our thinking, with our feeling, with our fears, boredom, and all the rest of it. To us, experience is a part of life. And the more we have been through experiences, the more we want. Or we want an ultimate experience. An experience that will give us a deeper, wider significance. An experience of something which is not measurable. We want more and more experiences. To us, there is no end to experience. And when one looks at experience, one sees that experience is the response of our condition. Whether you are a mathematician or a housewife, whatever one is, the response of the past as knowledge is the experience. And that experience only strengthens the past, which is knowledge, which is accumulative. So we have this extraordinary weight of experience of the past, individual, collective, in whatever particular society we live in. It is there. It's our background. It's our story. It's our culture. And that is always dictating our experiences, shaping our thoughts. And so there is no ending to experience. If there is an ending without, we say to ourselves, what is life without experience? But experience breeds also fear, anxiety, the sense of despair, not arriving, not achieving, always this sense of incompleteness, insufficiency. And so, we look to knowledge as a means of giving us a greater depth to me. Knowledge, which is experience, if you will not misunderstand what I'm saying, has come to an end. If one is to inquire into the whole question of despair, experience has to come to an end. We have various forms of despair. Not being able to fulfill, not achieving, not being somebody in this world, or the despair of loneliness, or the despair of this never-ending confusion, the despair of not knowing what to do, and so looking to somebody to tell us what to do, and knowing the utter empty futility of being told what to do. Whether it is a political leader or a religious leader or a scientific leader. We know this sense of uncertainty. And so, being uncertain, being in despair, we pile up experiences, knowledge. And knowledge doesn't dispel despair. Experience doesn't wipe away this sense of anxiety in life. So, one begins to question, if one has gone into it at all, what is the significance of experience? Not the little experiences of everyday existence, but also the deep experiences. I mean, like a Christian who's been brought up in orthodoxy, in belief, in dogma, in symbols. Yeah, his experience of seeing Christ is an astonishing thing to him. But it's fairly psychologically obvious. It's the projection of his own background, his own conditioning. As the Hindu sees his God, so the Christian sees his gods and his ideas. Now, is it possible, please follow this little bit, is it possible to live without experience? To me, knowledge, experience, and the desire for more experiences is the source of despair, because there is no innocency in this demand for experience. And it's only the innocent mind, the fresh mind, that has no despair. So, for most of us, if there is no outward challenge, if you haven't to earn a livelihood, if you haven't got to struggle, either compete with your neighbor, with your boss, with your the demands of propaganda, the magazines that tell you you must make success, and how you boot black become a king or a president or whatever it is. If there is not the outward challenge, most of us would go to sleep. Most of us would would have a stagnant, dull, stupid life. Not that we haven't got it. It is there. But this constant pressure from the outside keeps us going. And if one sees that, one rejects it, this outward pressures, this outward challenge. And that's a very difficult thing to do. I'm going into it. Not to respond to the stupidities of propaganda and challenge of social structure of life. The social, psychological structure. If one has put that aside, then one creates one's own challenges and responses. I don't know if you have not observed it. You're all the time questioning, asking, demanding, which becomes your own challenge, which is much more strict, much more vital than the outward demands, outward challenges. And you also begin to say that this constant questioning, this constant inquiry, tearing things to pieces, doubting, asking, is still the outcome of discontent. It's still the outcome of the desire to know, the desire to find out what is the purpose of life, if there is this and if there is that. So, one is still a slave to experience. One is still a slave to challenge and response. The one has rejected the outward challenges and challenges. And that keeps us also alive, much more alive, in a state of conflict. Please, I'm not saying anything outrageous. This is what takes place with all of us. The more intellectual, the more subtle one is, you reject the propaganda of religions and churches and politicians, the books and all that, and you have your own challenges, your own demands, your own standards, your own vitality to find out. Which indicates, doesn't it, that one is still dependent on this movement of question and answer, of demanding and answering. All this, both the inward challenge and the outward challenge, and the response to the inner and to the outer, surely indicates a conditioning of a mind that is still seeking, that's still wanting, that's still groping to find out. And therefore still within the field of guilt, within the field of despair. Now if one inwardly has gone as far as that, and then one rejects both the outer and the inner challenge, I hope you are following this, or rather I am making myself clear. If one has done that, then experience has very little meaning. Because such a mind is intensely awake, and a mind that is intensely awake does not need experience. It's only a dull mind that depends. And being dull and depending on challenge, it becomes more dull. It's caught in its own conflicts, confusion, and therefore depends on knowledge. See, I'm not advocating ignorance. To me, ignorance is not the lack of book knowledge. It doesn't mean that you're an ignorant person because you haven't read all the latest novels and philosophies and the dialectical materialism and all the rest of it. That doesn't mean that you're ignorant because you haven't read it. To me, ignorance is the state of unawareness of the operations of one's own mind, the lack of self-knowledge. That is the essence of ignorance. And, as I said, I'm not advocating that we must all become ignorant. You can't. But I'm pointing out that a mind that is awake does not need challenge and response. does not need any challenge because it's awake. It is not demanding any experience. It's a light to itself. And such a mind can surely live in this world without guilt, without anxiety, and without despair. Every other form of mind is in a state of conflict and despair. Now, if you have listened to this, not say, how am I to get it? You can't get it. It's the thing you buy. It's then the thing that you practice in order to have such a mind that is completely alive, every corner of its being awake. You can't get it, you can't buy it, you can't seek it out. There is no method, there is no system that you can practice and that will give it to you. But if you have listened, that's why I have been laying stress on listening. Just to listen, without wanting, without seeking. That listening is that state of mind when there is no knowledge, when there is no thought, in that state of mind in which there is creation, which is understanding. If you have listened, really, in that sense of that word, the meaning the meaning I give to it, then you will be out of this conflict, despair, and pain. And there is a miracle in listening. That is the real miracle.
The third extract is from Krishnamurti's fourth talk in Ojai in 1949 and is titled Facing Despair.
You may have read a lot of books. You might be surrounded by your family and children. Well, the change of new cars every year. The latest books, latest photographs, and all the rest of it. But when you intelligently discard distraction, you are inevitably faced with it, aren't you? The sense of inward frustration, the sense of hopeless despair without an end. Perhaps most of you are not aware of it. Or if you are, you run away from it. But it is there. So what is one to do? First of all, it seems to me, it's very difficult to come to that position, to be so aware that you are directly confronted with that thing. Very few of us are capable of facing that thing directly as it is. But it's extremely painful. And when you do face it, because you are so anxious to leave it, run away from it, you might do any act, including committing suicide. Or run away so far in any illusion, any distraction. So the first difficulty is to be confronted with it. Surely one must be in despair to find something. When you have tried everything all about you, every door through which you can possibly escape, and none of them offer an escape, you're bound to come to this point. Now, if you are at that point, really, actually, not fancifully, not wishing to be there, in order to do something else, when you are actually faced with it, then we can proceed and discuss what to do. Then it is worthwhile to proceed, but merely to find substitute for one escape for another. Join this organization and leave it and join something else. Go after one thing after another. When all those have stopped, which every intelligent man must eventually, sometime or other. Then, then what? Now, if you are in that position, what is the next response? When you are no longer escaping, when you are no longer seeking an outlet, a way to avoid it, then what happens? If you observe, what we do is, we respond to it. We have either a sense of fear with regard to it, or the desire to understand, which is, we give it a name. That way, we say, I am lonely, I am in despair, I am this, I want to understand it. That is the thing which we call lonely, empty. That we establish a relationship between ourselves and that by giving it a name. I hope you understand what I'm saying. That is, by verbalizing our relationship to it, we bring to it a neurological as well as psychological significance. And if we do not name it but merely regard it, look at it, then we shall have a different relationship. Then it is not away from us, it is us. Right? We say, for example, when we come to that point, I say, I am afraid of it. The fear exists only in relationship to something. That something comes into being when we term it, when we give it a name as being lonely. Therefore, there is the feeling that you and that loneliness are two separate things. But is that so? You, the observer, are observing the fact that which you term as being lonely. Is the observer different from the thing which he observes? It is different only as long as he gives it a name. But if you do not give it a name, the observer is the observed. The name acts, the term, acts only to divide. And then you have to battle with that thing. But if there is no division, if there is an integration between the observer and the observed, which exists only when there is no naming. You can try this out and you'll see. Then the sense of fear is entirely gone. It is fear that is preventing you from looking at that, which you call I'm empty, I'm this, I'm that, I'm in despair. And fear exists only as memory which comes when you turn. But when you are capable of looking at it without turning, surely that thing is yourself. So when you come to that point, when you are no longer naming the thing of which you are afraid, then you are that thing. When you are that thing, there is no problem, is there? It is only when you do not want to be that thing, or to make that thing different from what you are, then the problem arises. But if you are that thing, that the observer is the observed, that they are both joint phenomena, not a separate phenomenon, then there is no problem, is there? Please, you experiment with this and you will see how quickly that thing is resolved and transcended and something else takes place. It's only our difficulty is to come to that point when we can look at it without fear. And fear arises only when we begin to recognize it, when we begin to give it a name, when we want to do something about it. And when the observer sees that he is not different from the thing which he calls empty, despair, then the word has no longer a meaning. The word has ceased to be. It's no longer despair. Then what happens to proceed further is that the thing of which one has been afraid to look, and when the word is removed with all its implications, then there is no sense of fear or despair. Then there is no fear, no despair, then the word is no longer important. Surely, then, if you proceed further, there is a tremendous release, a freedom. And in that freedom there is that creative being. Which gives a newness to life. That is, to put it differently, we approach this problem of despair through habitual terror. That is, we bring our past memories to translate that problem. result of memory of the past. Thought which is founded upon the past can never solve that problem, because that problem is a new problem. Every problem is a new problem. And when you approach it with the old, it cannot be solved. And you approach it only through the screen of words, which is the thinking process. And when the verbalization stops, because you understand the whole process, it is not easy, then you are able to meet the problem anew. Then the problem is not what you think it is. So, you might say at the end of this question, what am I to do? Here I am in despair, in confusion, in pain. You have given me a method to offer, to proceed, to be free. But surely, if you have followed what I have said, the key is there. A key which opens much more than you will ever realize if you are capable of opening. Because you can see then that how words play an extraordinarily important part in our lives. Like God, like nation, like the political leader, like communism, like Catholicism, like words. What extraordinary significance it has in our life. And it is these words that are preventing the understanding of a problem anew, which is really simplicity. Not to be crowded by all these impressions and words and their significance, and to approach it anew. And I'm sure you can do it. It's quite an amusement if you can do it. For it reveals so much. And I feel that's the only way to tackle a fundamental problem of this kind. You must tackle a problem which is very deep, profoundly, not at a superficial level. And this problem of loneliness, despair, with which most of us are somewhat our rare moments acquainted, is not a thing to be dissolved by merely running off into some kind of amusement or worship. It is always there. Until you are capable of dealing with it directly and experiencing it directly, without any verbalization, without any screen between yourself and it.
The final extract in this episode is from the fourth talk in Madras 1967 and is titled Freedom from Despair is Not Through Hope.
One asks oneself if one is at all serious, whether it is not possible to live in this world, to go to the office if necessary, or not earn a livelihood at all. There are lots of people who are not saying I must earn a livelihood. Whether it is at all possible to live in this world from that state, from that dimension, and not approach the dimension through the usual practices which promise the dimension. Now, how does one come upon it? You understand my question? Because we have done all these things, meditated, sacrificed, remained celibate or not celibate. We have accepted the traditions, rituals, got tremendously excited over perfume and, idols and all the rest of ground the temple 7 times or 100 times and prostrate. We've done all those childish things. And if you have done all that and see the utter futility of all that, because they are born out of fear, born out of this sense of wanting some hope, because most of us are in despair. And to be free of despair is not through hope. To be free of despair, you have to understand despair itself and not introduce the idea of hope. That's very important to understand, because then you create a duality and there is no end to the corridor of duality. But if you say, but I am in despair, why? Go into it. Use your brain, you find out. One can see why you are in despair. Because life as it is lived has no meaning. It's terribly boring. Breeding a family, office, few moments of delighted looking at a picture, hearing the music, or seeing a lovely sunset. But otherwise life has no meaning at all. And we try to impose a meaning upon it. And that imposition is an intellectual trick. And you say, at the end of it, you become despairing, hopeless. Whereas if you went into it, into despair, and not create the opposite, found out why you are in despair. Either you want to fulfill, and in fulfillment there is always frustration, or you are in despair because you don't understand, or because your son, your mother, your wife, your husband, or somebody dies, and you have no understanding of that, or you're not loved. You're not loved because you don't know how to love. And so you're everlastingly in battle. And out of this battle of frustration, endless misery, despair comes. And to escape from that endless despair, you create a false illusion of hope. And therefore, you build an endless corridor of hope, whereas despair goes on. So we come to the point, and can the mind come upon it? You understand? Come upon it without discipline, without torture, without enforcement, without any book, without any leader, without any teacher, without any. Come upon it as you come upon a lovely sunset as that. When can one come upon it? Not how to come upon it. Not the machinery which will make you come upon it. then it is just another trick. Seems to me there are certain absolute things that are necessary. Not something to be gained, something you practice, something you do day after day. That is, there must be passion without motive. You understand? Passion which is not the result of some commitment or attachment or a motive. Because without passion, you cannot see beauty. Not the beauty of a sunset as that, or the beauty of a structure, beauty of a poem, beauty of a bird on its wing. But a beauty that is not an intellectual, comparative, a social thing. And to come upon that beauty there must be passion. And to have that passion there must be love. Just listen to it. You can't do a thing about all this. You cannot practice love. Then it becomes mere kindliness, generosity, gentleness, a state of non-violence, peace. But it has nothing whatsoever to do with love. And without passion and beauty there is no love. Just listen to it. Don't argue, don't discuss how, it's like leaving a door open. If you leave the door open, breeze of an evening comes in. You can't invite it. You can't prepare for it. You can't say, I must not. You can't go to religion, to ritual, all those. Just leave the door open, which means this very simple act. An act which is not of will, which is not of pleasure, which is not projected by a cunning mind. Just to leave a door open. And that's all you can do. You can't do anything else. You can't sit down to meditate. Make the mind silent by force, by compulsion, by discipline. Such a silence is noise and endless misery. All that you can do is to leave your mind, a door of the mind open. And you cannot leave that door open if you're not free. So you begin to disentangle yourself from all the stupid inventions, psychological inventions that the mind has created. To be free from all that. Not in order to leave the door open. Just to be free. It's like keeping a room clean, tidy and orderly. That's all. Then when you leave the door open without any intention, without any purpose, without any motive, without any longing, then through that door comes something which cannot be measured by time or by experience. It is not related to any activity of the mind. Then you will know for yourself, beyond all doubt, that there is something far beyond all the imagination of man, beyond time, beyond all inquiry.